Welcome. I will call the October Capital Program Committee meeting to order. Members of the public wishing to speak, Ms. King?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. We have 7 members of the public registered to speak today. We have 4 in person and 3 remote. As a reminder, I'd like to say to all the public speakers to please adhere to MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind the public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, you are limited to 2 minutes. Please be aware there will be a warning beep reminding you you have 30 seconds left to complete your comments. Our first speaker will be Rachel Foss. After Rachel will be Jason Anthony.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Foss. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for reInvent Albany. We advocate for more transparent and accountable New York State government, including for authorities like the MTA. We appreciate that the MTA released its 20-year needs assessment, meeting the new statutory deadline, and that staff are working to publish its underlying data on the state's open data portal. Relatedly, we thank MTA staff for recently publishing additional procurement data on the open data portal. The needs assessment argues that our transit system is in dire need of major maintenance, but unfortunately it does not say broadly or in detail how much it will cost to achieve a state of good repair. Instead of showing exactly how much money will be needed to fix our transit system, the assessment only provides specific dollar figures for every expansion project, with scorecards measuring the relative costs and benefits. We agree with the MTA that investing in a state of good repair must come first. This is crucial for everyday transit riders to get them where they need to go. Expansion projects should be considered after a state of good repair is achieved, not instead of state of good repair. But unfortunately, the assessment got it backwards. To emphasize that investing in a state of good repair comes first, the MTA must provide a solid and well-supported cost estimate. In advance of releasing the draft 2025-29 capital plan, we asked the MTA to provide detailed cost estimates for the investments needed on state of good repair. We support Citizens Budget Commission's request for an addendum that includes disaggregated cost and benefit estimates, identifying what should be invested in the next 5 and 20 years, and the effect on service and potential long-run costs if these investments are not made. Without complete costs for all the state of good repair needs, it's impossible to assess whether the next capital plan will make the right investments. With limited resources, the MTA and elected leaders must prioritize transit capital investments based on repairs that will directly benefit millions of everyday riders, not the allure of bright, shiny objects or politics. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Anthony, and following Jason Anthony is Bruce Hain.
Hey, Jano. Hey, Jamie. Here again. Speaking about capital, Jano, I wish that we could have a more comprehensive update regarding CVTC, because once again this morning, Lisa Dagny and I were affected by the 7 train meltdown that I couldn't essentially go to class this morning. So I decided to come here instead, like I do every month. Another thing, rolling stock. When we ever going to see the M9As replace the Metropolitan's M3As on Metro North? And last but not least, only update. I was at Jamaica on the air train station. Let me tell you, chaos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Port Authority meeting on Thursday. I'm going to address this situation with them because they don't seem to get the message. Because if we roll out Omni, we did the proper orientation, signage, and everything, but it seems that they get it through one ear and goes out through the other. So that will be all for this month. I'll see you guys in finance.
Thank you. Bruce Hain, and following Bruce Hain is Jack Connors.
Good morning, committee members, Chair. Well, the MTA is flush with funds, or so you've been saying, sort of, and I'm wondering, how it's going to be spent, because soon you won't be. And, you know, my FOIL request was constructively denied, but I said in the request that, in the appeal, that would be okay. If you just tell me why you're allowing your property next to the White Pot Junction to be boxed in. But I already know it's the policy, because 750 feet to the west of there, you've got 4 transformers in the middle of the right-of-way of this 6th track. And you have, now you're running twice as many trains, I would say, but it's the mileage is twice as high. The figures from last month say the mileage is twice as much, but you're moving 70% of the people. So what does that mean? Well, I mean, you can make lemonade out of East Side Access by going straight south to a station in Lower Manhattan that would have a connection to Brooklyn eventually. I mean, you got to plan these things ahead. There's no point in planning. You get something like the 7 train, you got to fix that up first. I mean, there should be a station at the Port Authority, and, well, it's over now. Thank you very much. I'm my usual complaints, you know.
Thank you. We're calling Jack Connors, and following Jack will be our first remote, Matthew Bunches Highland.
Good afternoon. I'm Jack Connors, Research and Communications Associate at the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. There's a lot to be excited about in the 20-year needs assessment released earlier this month. We appreciate the continued focus on resiliency and bringing us closer to the elusive state of good repair while charting a course towards some of the most ambitious system expansions we've seen since the MTA's inception. We hope to see a robust public input process so that riders can weigh in on the projects that matter most to them. We're also happy to see the MTA recognizing the need to adapt our system to changing travel and commute patterns. As the needs assessment discusses, 70% of the new jobs created in New York City by 2045 are projected to be outside of Manhattan. This makes it more important than ever to build high-quality radial connections between our subway lines and expand coverage into transit deserts. Proposals like Utica Avenue BRT, Staten Island North Shore BRT, the 2nd Avenue Subway West Extension, Ridgewood Busway, and of course IBX do just that. New clean construction methods provide the opportunity to rebuild and expand our transit infrastructure, which we know is crucial to meeting the goals outlined in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, while lowering the embodied carbon it takes to get there. We'll be keeping a close eye on pilot projects such as that on the RFK Bridge, which are using innovative methods for carbon sequestration. As we await more news about which of these projects will make it into the next capital program, now is the time to fully unify the MTA network by ensuring Omni is installed thoughtfully and effectively system-wide. Just last week, we noticed an Omni machine installed across the street at Bowling Green. We hope that soon, riders will be able to use Omni when they transfer between the LIRR and Metro North at Grand Central, and soon at Penn Station thanks to East Side Access. Now is the time for thoughtful conversations on how to best implement a rational and equitable fare structure. By enabling through ticketing between railroads and expanding transfer options with Omni, we can ensure that these systems are truly integrated. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Matthew Bunches. He's first remote speaker. Following him is Murray Bowden.
It's actually pronounced Bucky's, madam, but anyway, good afternoon, Chairman Lieber and President Springer and members of the committee. Earlier today, I spoke at the New York City Transit Committee meeting for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. And Jamie, you said your goal is to get 95% of the accessibility elevators by 2055, but I want to go to 100% by 2055, if not 2060 at the latest. You know, it is interesting to know, for example, that, I like when the announcer says, "This is an accessible station." the elevator's at the rear of the platform, like that. It would be great if all of the city subways had an elevator to get people wherever they want to go, whether it's express or local. I hope you would consider that in your long-term planning. Thank you, and God bless you, and have a great day. Miss King?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Murray Bowden, and following Murray would be Alita Dupree.
Hi, guys. Tech crew, you want to give us a picture of what's going on at the meeting? Because I don't need downtime clock is night, but doesn't show us the rest of the meeting. I'm talking about the Verdi Electric Corporation on the agenda today. You want to give them a contract for $32 million. They're the company that has the contract for Westchester County. Impossible to get them to do anything reasonable. The lights at 9A and Secor Road in Greenberg have been idiotically timed for years. They don't respond. So to give them a contract to do anything of substantial value is wrong. You need to take the time at this time to find some other contractor who will do work and pay attention to the public. This is about safety. They have the light so timed wrong that 10 or 15 cars can back up on Secor Road coming from the cemetery, and they can't get through the light. And then you wait 2 minutes till it comes green again. So the quality of service from Verdi Electric is negative. Thank you. I like that.
Thank you.
It's been a little difficult getting on and understanding your new system, but at 90, I don't travel so much anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden.
I didn't finish. I got 14 seconds. I like the respect that everybody else gets, and I don't like to be interrupted.
I'm
Good to
sorry,
see-
excuse me.
Yeah. Bye.
My apologies to him. Our final speaker is Alita Dupree.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Jana Lieber and members. Alita Dupree, for the record, she and her team folds today. Before I go into the agenda, I really enjoyed my time with you all last month, both in the boardroom and out on the system. So I hope to come back and visit again. I did read in the report, we have some red delay items, so we want to keep our focus up on those. Including an item with some buses that are being delayed due to cybersecurity issues. So we want to make sure we stay ahead on that. Cybersecurity is something that's been in the news quite a bit lately. But I want us to get more of those electric buses. And I did read of a possibility of the 2nd Avenue subway turning west under 125th Street to head toward the west side. I am in full support of such a plan. I think it will enhance crosstown movements in the northern neighborhoods. I did see 125th Street on my vacation to New York, including using the M60 bus, which took me over the RFK Bridge. So I think that's a good idea, and it could lead to a T connection, which could have an eastward extension to LaGuardia Airport. We need high capacity transit to LaGuardia Airport because I went there and it's crowded and the buses are doing a good job, but we need more. And not much to say about congestion pricing this month, but it's important. As much as I like cars and driving them, I don't like dealing with parking and traffic. So I hope that we can get congestion pricing and service so we can build the best subway that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, that concludes the public comment session.
Thank you, Ms. King, and thank you to members of the public. Copies of September Capital Program Committee minutes have been distributed, available on the website. Changes or comments on the minutes? Mr. Albert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 5, under public comments, Aleta is spelled incorrectly. It should be A-L-E-T-A. More importantly, on page 6, on the top, it says ADA upgrades at 149th Street and Tremont Avenue, which implies that's one station or one intersection, which of course it is not. It should say 149th Street Grand Concourse, 2 and 5, comma, and Tremont Avenue BD. And it repeats that further down as well. It's a little misleading that way.
Okay, clarification accepted. Anybody else? Any other comments? Okay, may I have a motion to approve with
So moved, as amended.
Ada, J.R. Rizzo, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? The minutes are approved. Changes to the work plan, Jamie?
Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the work plan.
All right, take it away, Mr. Torres Springer.
Thank you very much, Chair, members of the committee. Lots to report on today before we get to the focus of today's session, which is reporting into the committee on the 20-year needs assessment conducted by our great planning team at MTA C&D, who I'll introduce in a moment. I wanted to give you a few highlights from the last month. First of all, clean construction. As you know, the MTA drives the region toward the lowest greenhouse gases in the country by far. We avoid 20 million tons of net greenhouse gas emissions every year because of the MTA moving passengers around on trains and buses. But we're going further. We announced last April for Earth Day that we've committed to an 85% reduction in the MTA's operational emissions by 2040, or our wholesale emissions. And part of that is going to be a clean construction program to track and reduce greenhouse gases related to construction activities, which responds to direction in an executive order from the governor. Last year, C&D used 45,000 tons of concrete, which emitted nearly 30,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And we're attacking those embodied emissions in our construction activities in a leading and innovative way. As of this month, all new projects are required to track and report embodied carbon. And as you can see, we held a major industry event over the last few weeks to identify methods of reducing carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions embodied in construction, including substituting cleaner materials, using low emissions construction equipment, diverting construction waste, and reducing energy use through new design standards. So we'll be excited to report on the results of this effort as we move forward with tracking and reduction, and as we come up with our climate action plan toward the end of this year. As has been mentioned elsewhere, the first 5 R211S cars have been delivered to the Staten Island Railway. As we reported recently in the spring, these cars had been undergoing qualification testing. Last week, the first cars were delivered to the newly constructed Clifton shop, which is the state-of-the-art maintenance facility we opened last year. And it's important that it's up and running so that we can receive and commission these cars and bring them into service on Staten Island. I wanted to mention some collaboration between C&D and MTA Real Estate to continue to activate portions of our system with new customer-facing amenities with the release of a new solicitation to program vacant spaces. New York City Transit has over 200 retail units in the subway. COVID and changing retail models have really challenged the retail environment over the last few years. MTA Real Estate has done a great job reinvigorating retail in the system in innovative and engaging ways, reintroducing food and beverage uses and expanding vending with high-demand items. You can see on the left an example of a new cafe space at 86th Street on the 2nd Avenue subway line. 57 units are open and operating out of those 200 units. 20 units are under construction, and real estate is marketing over 100 units. There are some spaces beyond that that are uniquely challenging to fill, so we're releasing a limited solicitation for vacant units very soon. We plan to activate the spaces with uses that improve the travel experience, such as art installations or other socially beneficial uses for the city. acknowledging that these are not necessarily going to generate revenue for the MTA. So this solicitation looks for partners who are interested in improving the station atmosphere through engaging and creative activations, and look forward to receiving the results of that solicitation and reporting on some of those activation efforts to the committee in the future. The increased and enhanced capital program dedicated, particularly the portion of it dedicated to ADA station accessibility, continues to yield results in terms of completions and openings. Last month, we made New Dorp Station fully ADA accessible on Staten Island. It's the first station to do that on Staten Island with elevator improvements, while we have 5 stations that are accessible with ramps in Staten Island Railway. This project came in 10% under budget. We also celebrated a newly accessible station entrance for the southbound portion of the Hoyt Street Station in downtown Brooklyn. This accessible entrance was constructed and paid for entirely by Macy's, representing a private investment that's an important part of the program. Often, as we've talked about in this committee, the density of the city is a driver of cost for creating accessibility. But through partnerships like these, we found a way to harness that value, that density, to get accessibility done beyond our own efforts. Of course, we have the Zoning for Accessibility program that is taking advantage of those opportunities as well, and we'll have more to say on that in the future. On the railroads, last month we celebrated the 100th anniversary of Mineola Station with a completely renovated station, wider platforms that allow us to run longer 12-car trains to accommodate the increase in ridership thanks to the completion of Third Track and Grand Central Madison. The station was fully renovated inside and out, along with a unique art installation commissioned by MTA Arts and Design. Of course, this is part of the $17 billion that's been invested in the Long Island Railroad in the last 15 years, and a very efficient way of improving a station as part of the Third Track project. At the board this Wednesday, along with our operating partners, we'll be taking a deeper look into the recent resilience challenges that the system has faced and our operating and capital responses. Just to give you a quick preview, on September 29th, the region was hit with the remnants of Tropical Storm Ophelia. It was a massive rain event with significant impacts, but capital investments that we had previously made helped the system to bounce back faster. And we're learning from each event and using it to help build resiliency across the system as we move forward. Lots more to come on that, and we'll discuss this at the full board on Wednesday. This past weekend, of course, I know it's top of mind, a mudslide between Tarrytown and Croton Harmon shut down Metro North service on the Hudson Line. I want to express my gratitude to the C&D team who worked with Metro North in-house forces to help coordinate a response and get service restored for this morning. Taking a step back, it's also a sign of the acute challenges the Hudson Line faces in terms of resilience. As we said in the 20-year needs assessment, sea level rise, adjacent steep slopes, and increasing flash flooding events all pose a risk to the Hudson Line, and significant investment will be needed to make service more resilient in the 21st century. More on that at the board in a couple of days. It's a good transition to the presentation for today. In the last month, we put out our 20-year needs assessment. We celebrated the great planning team that's come together at MTA C&D and at the MTA in general to help us be strategic about the future of our system. And the 3 leaders who are most responsible for that are Frederica Cuenca, the Deputy Chief Development Officer for Planning, Alyssa Cobb-Conan, who heads the Capital Strategy and Planning Group, and Mike Schiffer, the head of Long Range and Regional Planning here at the MTA. And so with that, I want to pass it on to Frederica and team to give us a rundown of the 20-year needs assessment.
Okay. All right. So it's really been my pleasure to lead this consolidated planning team here at C&D. And over the past 2 years, we've spent a lot of time with our agency partners who, keep the system running and really do understand the needs of the system the most. And this 20-year needs assessment is an outcome of that partnership. The 20-year needs is a comprehensive, data-driven look at the condition of, this amazing system that is so essential to the people and the economy of New York. By sharing this information, our stakeholders will have a better understanding of all the different parts of our system and a better understanding of what it will take to keep this infrastructure going well into the future. This information in the document is the foundation of our planning process and will be released on our open data portal soon. So we share this information at a moment of great optimism, really, at the MTA. The governor and the legislature solved our operating budget deficit caused by the disruption of COVID, guaranteeing years of operating stability. Across the MTA, our operating agencies' on-time performance is up and customer satisfaction is improving. And on the capital side, we've invested in this system for the past 40 years and with successive capital plans, and really this is an amazing foundation that's so important to the region, and this last one is 70% larger than the prior ones. But what that assessment that we undertook with our partners at the agencies found and revealed is that there is a massive need for investment throughout our system. Some of these needs you can see, and we hear from our customers about them, but there's also an incredible amount of need behind the curtain and that people don't see. And as our system ages and undergoes major change, more and more investment is going to be necessary to maintain and improve all aspects of it. So thanks to these few key challenges that are confronting our system all at once, we're at a pivotal moment where the future of the system depends on how we react. Aging infrastructure, we've talked a lot about that, but just to give a couple of examples of how that can impact the system, more than 98% of Metro North service could be disrupted or suspended if the Grand Central train shed fails. Power failures could lead to frequent service disruptions. In 20 years, 75% of New York City Transit substations will be over 50 years old. Climate change. Past couple of weeks really make it very clear to us that this is something that we need to confront. And while we're very proud of the quick service restoration that our agency partners were able to accomplish, it's only going to get harder to do this as the storms are intensifying and are become more frequent. Without investment, we will have more disruption and longer-term disruptions. Services like Metro North, Jamie just mentioned, right, could literally be underwater or under mud, depending on your thoughts on what climate change is going to bring us. Evolving rider needs. Our riders' expectations are changing from remote work to the expectation of up to the second information and friction-free travel information, smooth access to the system through Omni. If our services are not reliable or don't meet rider expectations, there is a risk that a critical mass of these riders will choose another way or just won't travel, all of which really undermines the future of our region. So we think about these ways to respond to these threats in three ways. Rebuild, to keep the system safe and reliable. To improve, so that we evolve our system to make it ADA accessible and prepared to meet climate risks, and providing timely information and access to riders. And if there are sufficient resources, we have also evaluated numerous proposals to expand the system. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Alyssa and Mike, to go through our approach and the findings in more detail.
All right, thanks, Frederica. To understand, there we go. To understand what needs to be rebuilt, we need to understand where we're starting from. What are the existing conditions? So we assessed nearly 6 million assets, and shown on the screen are some numbers of assets that we have across the system, and we had to do two things. We had to both explain the scale of the need and explain it in enough detail that people really understand what we're facing into the future. So what we did in our document, which I hope you've had a chance to look at, and I encourage you to look at if you haven't, is it's really divided into two sections. And I'm actually going to start with the back first, which is the appendix. And in the appendix, we examined the condition of all the assets in a way that we hope is more transparent to the public going forward. We use the FTA scale, which rates things from 1 to 5, where 1 is poor and 5 is excellent. And we looked at each of the assets and in often cases their components and sometimes even their subcomponents. And then we highlighted which things are in poor and marginal condition. And the reason we did that is because it helps to understand kind of a baseline, an irrefutable amount of capital need that's needed in the coming years. And I'm going to give you an example. Here's station platforms. You can see on the left something that's in 1 or 2, a poor marginal condition. And in this case, rest assured, it has been addressed, but it shows the underneath of a platform where there's a need for capital work pretty immediately in terms of a capital planning perspective. And then in the middle is the adequate condition, something maybe is aesthetically not as pleasing, but still has functional use. And then a 4 or 5, of course, is good and excellent, is easy for us to understand. So again, we focused on those things that were in 1 or 2, poor or marginal condition to create that sense of what we really need to get to. And then in the front of the document, we talked about sort of themes or things that we saw when we looked at everything all together. And I'm going to go through some of examples of agency by agency needs that we see, in particular when we look at that longer term view over 20 years. So as Frederica just highlighted, in New York City Transit, we see a great need in power. We're facing this threefold increase in the number of subcomponents that will be past their useful life in the next 20 years. Signals, we want to continue our CBTC implementation at the same pace that we've been doing, meeting 90% of our riders by 2045. And then shops and yards, which I know we've highlighted at the board in the past, continues, of course, to be a big need for us. This is an area where it is behind the curtain. Many of these locations, more than 100 years old. In the case here, we show Livonia again as a reminder. This is a location where not only are the building conditions something that need to be addressed, but also don't meet the functional needs for our new cars as they come in. In Metro North, some highlights here are what we called in the 20-year needs the Grand Central Artery. That includes the train shed, which of course we've spoken about before, as well as the viaduct and the tunnel, and the systems within Grand Central itself, some of the utilities that all need work and obviously are fundamental to providing Metro North service. Another highlight, of course, are our stations, where 19 platforms on the Harlem line all need to be addressed, and that is at a scale that's greater than our usual capital programs. On Long Island Railroad, structures are a main theme, whether that's the Atlantic Avenue tunnels or our viaducts. We have 9 viaducts that need significant reconstruction. And our signal system, we have about 50 miles of signals to be addressed so that we can have a fully centralized signal system for Long Island Railroad. Across all 3 railroads, fleet renewal is always a critical focus. We foresee up to 65% of our fleet needing to be replaced over the next 20 years. And last, but of course not least, bridges and tunnels needs to maintain the same level of investment they've been doing. They're excellent work in the capital program, but it doesn't mean that it's over. They still have deck replacements to do here on the Verrazano lower level or their cable preservation program. Moving on to our next category, of course, we need to rebuild, but at the same time improve. And some key aspects of this have been highlighted previously is, of course, accessibility, restating our commitment to get to 95% of stations by 2055, which would be about 90% of riders for subways by 2045, and 95% of full-time railroad stations, commuter railroad stations by 2045. As Jamie just mentioned, MTA Transit is part of the climate solution, and that's a twofold strategy. One is, of course, the rebuilding and opportunities to improve so that we can grow our ridership. That's really critical to the entire region, and then reducing our own emissions, as previously mentioned. Another major theme in the 20-year needs was resilience, again, as Jamie just mentioned, whether that's from flash flooding and some of the tactical capital improvements that we want to continue to make as we find those locations that need to be addressed in that way, to major infrastructure projects such as some of the work we've done for coastal surge, work at our yards, or our sea level rise in the Hudson line and other lines that need focus as a whole line segment. We want to continue to maintain room in our capital program for innovation. Today's efforts of fare payment or fare gates and apps are the things of today. We want to make sure that we have room for those in the future as well. In the 20-year needs, we really highlighted these two choices that we face. One is if we kind of don't keep up with the replacement needs, we could have a system that maybe looks like the 70s, for example. But if we face these challenges, that we see quite a bright future. And in that context, I'm going to hand it over to Mike.
Thank you, Alyssa. While it's clear that maintaining a state of good repair and upgrading our existing network are critical priorities, we can't lose sight of our future needs. And so that's the part of the 20-year needs assessment that I've been involved with. Over the decades, there have been many potential investment proposals for expansion on our network that have been proposed by various grassroots groups, civic organizations, various communities, as well as transit professionals. Many of these ideas were advanced with different assumptions regarding cost, levels of service, and ridership. And what we've done is we've drawn upon industry best practices to assess each of over 20 proposals. And these industry best practices basically are fed with a variety of information. So as an example, we use tools to for example, for ridership projection. We use a regional transportation forecasting model. And that really feeds not only the ridership evaluative criteria, but it also feeds travel time, it feeds capacity, it feeds equity, it feeds a variety of these different evaluative measures. And what it is basically it looks at population and employment growth in the region up to 2045, and it looks at our network. And it looks not only at how the network will behave within a specific intervention, such as a line extension or connection, it also looks at how the rest of the network behaves. And so that's an important input. Another important input to our evaluative criteria is cost. And so one of the things we do is we look at differing cost assumptions that have been made in the past with these various projects. And what we've done is we've adopted FTA's standard cost categories for uniformity. And we've normalized unit cost data for each project. So consistent assumptions were made regarding inflation to a midpoint of 2027. And we also applied consistent assumptions regarding operations and maintenance costs. So a variety of these different evaluative criteria which are used consider the input of various models and tools to basically feed them so we can look at these things on an even standing. Now, these evaluative criteria also have various metrics that feed into them. And so ridership isn't just how many people are riding on a given train or bus. It really looks at where they're coming from, whether they're new to the MTA, coming from, say, an automobile, or whether they're existing riders coming from other parts of the network. We also assess equity in terms of not just, for example, race and income, but we also look at access to automobiles. We look at transit dependency, language proficiency, and other measures that are considered following FTA guidance as well. We look at other things as well, such as with respect to resilience and sustainability, we're looking at vehicle miles traveled reduction, and our model tells us that, how many people are going to come out of automobiles. And we also look at, with respect to sustainability, what are the presence of alternative transit options. So there's a lot of data that really goes behind these evaluative criteria. And a number of these criteria are used to provide us with a good vision for a key measure, which is cost effectiveness. And so for that, we've looked at cost spent per time saved. And so we look at travel time savings, which is important to everybody on the network, and we look at ridership and cost, and we combine those and we get a metric there as well. So all these metrics are very important as we put it together and gather the data. And that's what this is all about, is gathering data and providing the region with information to really start the conversation about the benefits of potential enhancements and expansions. Now, this information is summarized on basically summary sheets in the appendix of the 20-year needs assessment. And you can look it up for all of the individual projects. In addition, the projects where the measures are quantitative, they're assigned a score of 1 to 100 in a way to normalize it so they can be compared with one another as well. And then these summary tables were further summarized in a chart. Don't expect you to read it now. Again, it's in the 20-year needs assessment and available for folks to look at. So you can look at the Harvey circles, where the darker the circle, the better performing a particular project is on its particular evaluative criteria. So again, the whole point of this comparative evaluation is to provide a data-driven input to an already robust conversation about the future of our network. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Frederica.
Okay, so where do we go from here? So just to zoom out again, right, after we've put all the information that you just heard about the way that we put together the 20-year needs and our findings, just to put it all into context. Last spring, the governor and the legislature recognized the MTA is essential to the future of New York. Right? That was and we have an operating budget that makes the commitment to full service even as we are recovering our ridership. The 20-year needs assessment reminds us that in order to meet the commitment of 100% service, we need 100% of our infrastructure. And that means capital investment to keep the system safe, reliable, and easy to use. My colleagues at the rest of C&D have done tremendous work to make the case and to do the work to support the message that the MTA and C&D, is the team and our agencies are ready and responsible stewards of the public dollars. You've heard a lot about how we're doing better, faster, and cheaper, so I won't repeat all of that here. And so all of this is a setup to the next capital program that will be due next fall. As you said, the information and the findings of the 20-year needs is a foundation for that capital program, and all of this is available on our website for reference, for reading as a novel, however it is you like to take this in. It's all there and ready to use and plan for our next steps.
Thank you. Thank you to the team for this tremendous effort and results. And so we'll take board member questions. I think we're starting with Ada over here.
So thank you again, Frederica, Alyssa, and Mike. I had the privilege, was it last year that I served on the little task force we put together to see all this stuff. And oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, no. So I appreciate, and I'm sure that the things that we talked about in that task force are in this this report. But so you broke it down to 3 buckets: rebuild, improve, and expand. But where are the non-sexy things, as I call it, like the state of good repair, the painting of the subways, the patching, all that stuff? Where does that fall into? Because I guess if we don't do that and maintain our infrastructure, then it just leads to bigger problems down the line.
So that's all described in the rebuild and in the appendices that you, that Alyssa referred to. All of the different assets, the 6 million assets that were assessed, are all in the appendix and evaluated there. And it's from there that we take that information and turn those into the projects that you will see in a capital program.
So would we see like the painting of the 6th line in that appendix?
So you will see the overall, like the status of the painting program, the parts of the percent of the system that still requires, painting.
But we won't see the details of,
You won't see
The
this
line.
segment versus that segment.
no, like the 7
No.
train, the 6 line, and it won't show
Right,
different
it's-
lines.
Yeah, we didn't provide at that level of information.
Okay.
But it's a summary because it's a needs assessment to understand the overall scale
Okay.
of what we need.
No,
what
I
we
understand
need
that,
to
but
do.
then when we put together the capital plan, we would see that level of detail when the capital plan is put together, right? The line items, the way the city does it, or no? Am I?
I'll just say that to your point, board member, there are multiple factors that drive what we invest in and how much it costs in the 5-year program. The need, which we've identified here, the way that we package projects together, which we've increasingly, and this is what our development group led by Tim Mulligan does a lot of this work, along with Mark Roche in delivery, how we package them together to take advantage of the scarce resources in our system, particularly outages and labor support, force account support. And then, of course, funding available at a certain point becomes very important. And so that's where we begin to identify priorities and package them together, and they become projects which go out for procurement.
Let's go down the line.
Okay.
Mr. Jones, Mr. Chu, Mr. Albert.
Yeah, a couple of the speakers have raised the question, have you gotten a dollar figure to deal with the state of good repair? In other words, have we, how much is this going to cost? What in terms of that portion? That's the first question. I have another.
Right. Well, I think the first point is, I think what Jamie just said, right, is the cost comes from how we put this together and how we package it and how we implement the program. So to come up with a dollar amount for 20 years when it's really the implementation of the program and the dollar amounts and inflation and all the things that go into costing a project at the detail that's needed to provide a realistic assessment, is the work of the capital program.
That'll come in 5-year units.
Right.
The second question, and I'll stop. Obviously, I've been approached, I think some of us have been approached with all sorts of ideas, the Rockaway, rebuilding, things that are happening in Queens and Brooklyn. Is there going to be a chance for sort of public comment on any of these going forward?
Absolutely. So what Mike described, as part of the needs assessment, we've done this comparative evaluation. It's not making any judgments. It's simply reporting the results of the comparative evaluation. And, we're able to score along a whole bunch of different dimensions, as Mike described, and report on that. And this is an opportunity for public dialogue. Mike and his team are out briefing, groups of elected officials and concerned community stakeholders who are interested in specific projects. We've done board member briefings as well, and we'll continue to do that. And this is an opportunity, again, as we figure out what we can invest in the next 5-year capital program, which is due next fall. This is the opportunity to take in all of that input. But, everyone has emphasized, and I want to emphasize as well, unless we have the ability to invest in state of good repair, expanding the system would not be the responsible thing to do. We have to make sure we can maintain the existing system.
Mr. Chu.
Well, I want to make an official note that I've requested the audiobook version narrated by Jano, but I know you're busy, so I'll give you some time. But we'll need it before we start to plan the capital program. I was very curious about this, about what this 20-year needs assessment looked like for several months, and I just want to say that I was not only happy with what came out, I was extremely impressed. And really to wrap your head around the amount of work that went into this, it was really incredible. And to you okay? That's what you get. That's what you get for asking questions. To build on Mr. Jones's point about public comment, one of the immediate benefits of this that I realized was our ability to have a conversation with stakeholders, which at times can be frustrating because there's a lot of emotions behind, wishes, desires. You calling security on me for the? And I think that this is not only an important document for us as a board to go forward in planning for the capital program, but I think it's actually a great resource for regional planning overall, because now, we're going to have a basis, for conversation, that's really agnostic to a lot of the emotions and a lot of the assumptions about certain projects, to be able to help other, communities that would like to see projects happen understand where they fit in our thinking, and then have a conversation around it. So I think that's, this is really, a monumental step forward for planning, and gives me great confidence, to know that, we're going to be able to invest properly in the system. So thank you to your team, and just let me know when I'd like, as a board member, I'd like at least a 1 week advance notice of the audible version.
Thank you.
I'm as excited as Sammy, but I'm not going to break anything. As I've told Jamie and Jano, I've been here a long time, and I've seen many of these 20-year needs assessments, and I've never seen one as well presented, well researched, well verified, and logically thought out as this one. So thank you all to the entire team for that. Mike had a slide in his presentation which showed all these different projects and ratings, I assume, or who made those ratings? Could I ask that?
So those ratings came directly from the data. And what it was, so for example, if a project, say, had a cost range between X and Y, okay, or all projects had a cost range between X and Y, rather, there's a way to effectively normalize that. That is, assign a score. So the projects that are at the higher end of the cost have a relatively lower score relative to the other projects.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
when you say high cost, if one of them was going to produce increased ridership, is that considered in the higher cost?
So the ridership is considered separately from the cost, but they are combined in one of the measures, okay, which I'll get to in a sec. But so cost was assigned a score, for example, of 0 to 100. Okay, and ridership, say new riders to the system, were assigned a score of 0 to 100, et cetera. And then time savings was assigned a score as projects performed with the output of the models that we used. Now, those scores...
And I think you also said diverting people from one form of transportation to the system is another form of score.
That it is.
Yeah.
So these were all taken into account. Now, one of the things we did to make it a little more straightforward is we also calculated a cost effectiveness measure. And that cost effectiveness combined cost with ridership and time saved, okay? So that's one that combines several of the attributes. But you can see the performance on any of these individual attributes basically reported in the appendix. And you can work backwards. The simplest measure are the circles that you saw there.
Yeah.
But that's very, very simplistic. It's like Consumer Reports. If you want to dig deeper, you can go into the appendix, and then you can see that score I was talking about, a 0 to 100 score that's normalized across these things. And if you want to go even further, there's the actual quantitative measures behind that, the actual ridership numbers, cost numbers, et cetera. So it's all laid out there.
Clearly, though, some of the costs of an expansion, for instance, can only be estimated because until you start digging, you don't know what you're going to find.
That's correct.
They're all estimates at this point, but they're all, based on the FTA categories of costs that need to be gathered and considered so that we have, standardized costs across all the projects, and again, standardized model. The point was to produce this data, not taking one from an old study and another from a new study, and this one gives you this type of rider and that one gives you that type of rider, or time saved in different metrics. They're all the same metrics so that we can have that conversation with a common, understanding of what these projects will do for mobility in the region.
Thank you.
Comments from the board. I'll just say one thing, which is some of you have been here for a while and remember the the Crow forensic audit. The MTA was directed by the legislature to do a forensic audit of, among other things, its capital planning process. The way this was done was directly in adherence to that. And the two things that this does that haven't been done before is the level of detail with respect to the condition of assets. Nothing remotely like it has never been done before. And it combines what you call EAM. You've heard a lot about our enterprise asset management system, which is basically when the engineering teams and the maintenance teams and the operators have been going around and working with the system. They take down data on the condition of all of the assets. And that in turn becomes part of this huge database. And all the other information that can be collected about these 6 million different components and assets. That's never been done before. This level of detail has never been remotely accomplished before. So data about the condition and the criticality to service. So to Haida's question, ultimately when you look at all of the bridges that are of a certain category in condition, and you're trying to decide among them which ones you would pursue, you'll have information about criticality to service, the volume of service that could be impacted by that, and also you will have information about how that project could be combined with other projects to create a bundle that would efficiently get the most important projects done in one fell swoop. So there's respectfully, when everyone says, well, just give us the numbers of how much it's going to cost, it's really every project is deeply connected to what's the combination of work that you're going to put together for a project and how you're going to get it done. So it's a complicated exercise, and it really requires us to get closer to proposing a specific capital program rather than just throwing numbers at it. The one number I would throw at you that's really important is $1.5 trillion. That's the value of this asset. And basic business school principles say we ought to be investing a heck of a lot more to keep it in condition. An old industrial asset that's worth $1.5 trillion does not deserve the level of investment it's been given, I would say, in the last 30 years. The last capital program was a substantial upsurge, but we have to think about this a little bit differently if we're willing to preserve this thing, rather than letting this legacy of our forebears and foremothers go to waste. So with that, Sammy, yeah.
It came up at our railroad committee this morning about, obviously in context with the mudslide and funding and what that does to our budget.
Yeah.
I have to imagine, but I'd love to hear you speak to it to detail, that organizing, our projects and doing this evaluation will allow us to be better prepared for, federal hardening dollars when they become available. So, but I'd love to hear more about the context of that, because it was a topic we discussed this morning.
That's right. It's a great example. The Hudson Line needs a strategy, and the strategy starts with understanding what the vulnerabilities are. We're actually in the middle of that now. This same planning team has started to dig in, working with Metro North, specifically where do we see the problems, where are the failures, what tools do we have to address them, and then we'll come up with a comprehensive plan. Some of it will be on the operating side, some of it will be on the capital side, but every dollar that we invest in capital work on the Hudson Line needs to build resiliency. And we can only do that if we've got a strategy in advance. And of course, there's no better way to obtain federal funding or other forms of funding that are earmarked for specific purposes than having those projects in a drawer ready to pull out when the funding becomes available. So that's why we started with the needs assessment, and we'll now launch into a full planning effort on the Hudson Line. I should mention, actually, to your point, board member, we have applied to FHWA to begin with planning dollars to plan for the resiliency of the Hudson Line and the Mott Haven line, the Mott Haven Yard, where we see a lot of issues. So we're on it.
I don't want us to run too much more over, but this is super exciting to have this data, and it'll help us shape the capital program. Let me just say, all of the board members are going to be part of shaping the capital program, because We're giving you this thing now to chew on. Literally, we hope that you'll dig into this and develop a perspective on some of this. But we're going to be working the next year. We wanted to get it out early because we have about a year till we have to really figure out the capital program.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
One last thing.
Yeah.
What percentage of the items in this need statement are contingent on congestion pricing, would you estimate? Is there a way to do that?
I think there's so much stuff here, Andrew. The
Okay.
congestion pricing is funding a lot of stuff in our system. It's funding things that are in the rebuild category, things that are in the improve category, and even things that are in the expand category. So it's money is fungible, but if we don't have it, it starts to limit what we can do. Okay. With that, I'm going to sort of try to bring down the curtain for with our procurements. Ms. Boudoir, will you help us with the procurements?
Good afternoon. Construction and Development is presenting 8 procurement actions totaling $98.3 million to the Capital Program Committee for approval this month. The procurement package includes 7 competitive actions. First is a request to authorize the use of a competitive request for proposals process to award a contract to replace the fire standpipe system on the upper level at the Grand Central Terminal. Second is a request to approve a new award for Progressive Design Build Phase 1 services for state of good repair work at various subway stations. Next is a request to approve a new award for design build services to replace mobile substation C16 on the Metro North's New Haven line. Next is a request to approve a new award for consultant services for the development of new program and project controls, policies, processes, and procedures for C&D. Next, a request to approve 2 modifications to the CBTC Queens Boulevard Line Phase 1 project to add additional work, resolve contractor claims, and extend the substantial completion dates. And a request to exercise the second option of a contract to provide CBTC equipment for new R211 cars. The package also includes a request to ratify a modification to perform additional engineering tasks to support CBTC for the New York City Transit subway system. These items are described in detail in the staff summaries contained within your committee books, and I hereby submit them for your consideration and vote.
Any questions? Go ahead, please.
I have a question about number 2 and number 4. Number 2 is the state of good repair, is just lumped in together. And the detail I would find where?
Number 2 is the progressive design for, so the detail is in the book.
Okay.
But if you have questions about progressive design build, we can talk about them now.
And then number 4 was to procure things for C&D. What was that one?
Number 4 is a consultant contract to help us to develop new project controls, policies, procedures.
I didn't hear the consultant contract. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions? May I have a motion to approve? Mr. Chu, second. Mr. Jones. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The items carry. That concludes today's agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Hada. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for the second. We are adjourned.